Seattle winters have a way of wrapping the city in a muted hush. Nights fall early, and the world outside feels distant, as though everything pauses in the drizzle. On evenings like this, my apartment becomes my sanctuary. A cozy throw blanket, the low murmur of a TV show I'm not really watching, and Lucy, my orange tabby, curled up on the couch beside me, her gentle purring filling the room. That night started like any other. A warm mug of cocoa rested on the coffee table, and a half-forgotten novel sat in my lap. The world outside was wrapped in rain, and for once, the quiet felt like a gift. Oliver, my younger brother, was out somewhere doing what he always did, keeping busy, keeping distracted. He'd been staying with me for the past 6 months, ever since our parents' divorce uprooted everything. I hadn't thought twice about letting him crash here. It felt like the natural thing to do. Besides, Oliver brought life to this space, even if his endless teasing and habit of leaving his sneakers everywhere sometimes drove me crazy. But that night, something shifted. The front door opened quietly, almost hesitantly. That alone was strange. Oliver was usually the type to announce his arrival with a loud joke or a dramatic "I'm starving. What's for dinner?" I didn't even look up at first. "Hey," I called out, my eyes still on the TV. Nothing. No cheeky response, no laugh. Just the sound of him moving through the room. That's when I turned my head and noticed it. Something was off. He wasn't his usual confident self. His shoulders were tense, his steps deliberate. "Oliver?" I asked, my voice softer this time. He didn't answer right away. Instead, he sank onto the couch, closer than usual. Lucy, who normally adored him, stirred, then jumped off the couch without a sound, retreating to her favorite spot by the window. That struck me as odd. Lucy never left Oliver's side when he was home. "Are you okay?" I asked, now fully focused on him. "Yeah, fine," he muttered, avoiding my eyes. But his tone gave him away. He wasn't fine. For a few moments, neither of us said anything. The TV droned on in the background, but I couldn't concentrate. His silence, normally so rare, filled the room in a way that made my chest tighten. "Something's on your mind," I said finally, trying to coax him out of whatever shell he'd retreated into. He hesitated, then nodded slightly, his gaze fixed on the floor. "I don't know, Claire," he began. "Lately, it just feels like something's changed." I tilted my head, unsure of what he meant. "Changed? What do you mean?" He shifted uncomfortably, running a hand through his hair. "I don't know how to explain it. I just feel like things between us are different now." His words lingered in the air, heavy and uncertain. I tried to laugh it off, brushing aside the strange weight in his tone. "Well, yeah, living together will do that. You're not exactly the neatest roommate." But he didn't laugh. Instead, he looked at me with an expression I couldn't quite read, something between vulnerability and hesitation. "It's not that," he said quietly, his voice barely above a whisper. A chill ran down my spine, though I couldn't explain why. I opened my mouth to respond, but nothing came out. My mind was racing, trying to piece together what he was trying to say. I didn't know whether to press him further, or let it go. "Forget I said anything," he murmured, standing abruptly. "I'm just tired." And just like that, he was gone, retreating to his room and leaving me alone with my thoughts and Lucy's curious gaze. I sat there for a long time, the rain tapping softly against the windows, my cocoa now cold. I replayed his words in my mind, over and over, trying to make sense of them. What did he mean? Something's changed? Between us? I shook my head, trying to dismiss the unease creeping into my chest. Lucy jumped back onto the couch, curling up in her usual spot as if nothing had happened. I reached out to stroke her soft fur, finding some comfort in her steady presence. But even as her purring filled the silence, I couldn't shake the feeling that something important had shifted, and that whatever it wasn't going away anytime soon. The morning after our strange conversation felt oddly normal, at least on the surface. I woke up early and made my way to the kitchen, letting the soft gray light filter through the windows as I brewed a pot of coffee. The steady rhythm of my morning routine was soothing. Lucy, my ever-loyal tabby, trotted behind me as usual, her tail curling in curiosity as if she sensed something was different. Oliver still hadn't come out of his room. That wasn't like him. He was always the first one up, making noise or rummaging through the fridge. But this morning, the apartment was unusually quiet. I tried to ignore it, brushing it off as I'm catching up on sleep. Still, that strange tension from the night before hung in the air, like an unsaid word just waiting to be spoken. By mid-morning, I couldn't take the silence anymore. I knocked on his door lightly. "Hey, you planning on hiding in there all day?" I teased, though my voice betrayed a hint of concern. A muffled, "Yeah, I'm fine," came through the door, but it didn't convince me. Oliver wasn't the type to hole up unless something was really bothering him. When he finally emerged around lunchtime, he looked off. His hair was unkempt, his sweatshirt rumpled, and his usually bright eyes seemed clouded with thoughts he wasn't ready to share. Lucy, who adored Oliver, usually ran to greet him. Instead, she stayed curled up on the couch, watching him with her head tilted, as if she were trying to read his mind. "You okay?" I asked cautiously, leaning on the kitchen counter. "Yeah," he said, avoiding eye contact. I didn't push, even though I wanted to. Instead, I handed him a cup of coffee and let the quiet settle between us. We sipped in silence, the sound of the rain against the windows the only thing filling the room. The day dragged on. I tried to focus on work, but my thoughts kept wandering. Every time I passed Oliver's door, I wondered if I should knock again or just leave him alone. Lucy followed me from room to room, occasionally jumping onto my desk and nudging me with her head, as if trying to remind me that I wasn't the only one unsettled. By late afternoon, I couldn't take it anymore. I was folding laundry in the living room when Oliver walked in, looking lost in thought. He sat down without a word, his gaze fixed on the floor. "Oliver," I said softly, setting the laundry aside. "What's going on? You've been acting weird since last night. Talk to me." For a moment, he didn't respond. Then he sighed, running a hand through his hair. "I don't know how to explain it, Claire. It's like something's been different lately. Between us." His words hung in the air, heavy with meaning I couldn't quite grasp. "Different how?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. He shook his head, frustration flickering across his face. "I don't know. Maybe it's just me. Maybe I'm overthinking things." The way he said it, though, didn't sound like he believed his own words. I studied him carefully, trying to make sense of what he wasn't saying. He looked so vulnerable, so unlike the confident, easygoing brother I knew. Lucy jumped onto the couch between us, breaking the silence. She stretched lazily, her eyes flicking back and forth between us, as if trying to bridge the gap. I reached out to scratch behind her ears, grateful for the distraction, but the weight of Oliver's words stayed with me. "Look," I said finally, "whatever's going on, you don't have to figure it out alone. I'm here, okay?" He nodded but didn't say anything else. After a moment, he got up and mumbled something about needing fresh air before heading out the door. I watched him go, feeling a mix of concern and helplessness. That evening, I sat by the window with Lucy on my lap, listening to the rain. Oliver hadn't been gone long, but the apartment felt emptier than usual. I stroked Lucy's fur, trying to quiet my racing thoughts. What did he mean? Something's different? Was it just stress, or was there something deeper going on? Lucy purred softly, her warmth grounding me. As I sat there, I realized I couldn't ignore the feeling that something between us had shifted. I didn't know what it meant, and that scared me. But whatever it was, it felt like we were heading toward a moment that neither of us could avoid. The day began as dull and gray as the last, with rain streaking the windows and the apartment cloaked in a quiet stillness. I tried to keep myself busy, folding laundry, answering emails, anything to distract myself from the weight of unanswered questions. Lucy followed me everywhere, her soft paw steps padding behind me like an echo of my own restless thoughts. Oliver, though, remained a ghost, his door closed, his presence muted. It wasn't like him. Oliver was usually the loud one, the one filling the space with music, jokes, or his endless commentary about whatever show he'd binge-watched the night before. But for 2 days now, He'd barely left his room, and the silence was starting to gnaw at me. By midday, I couldn't pretend anymore. I walked to his door and knocked softly. "Oliver? You good in there?" No answer. I knocked again, louder this time. "Seriously, you've been in there all morning. What's going on?" After a pause, I heard slow footsteps. The door creaked open, and Oliver stood there, looking like he hadn't slept much. His hair was a mess, his eyes tired, but there was something else, a heaviness in his expression that made me hesitate. "I'm fine," he said, his voice flat, though the way he avoided eye contact said otherwise. "Fine doesn't look like this," I said gently. "Talk to me." He rubbed the back of his neck, glancing down the hall. "Not here. Let's go outside." The rain had eased to a drizzle by the time we stepped outside, the air damp and cool. We walked in silence for a while, our footsteps splashing in shallow puddles on the sidewalk. The neighborhood was quiet, the kind of stillness that comes with a rainy afternoon, and I let the quiet stretch between us, waiting for him to speak first. We ended up at the park down the street. The swings glistened with raindrops, and the jungle gym stood empty. Oliver walked over to the swings and sat down, the chains creaking softly as he pushed off the ground. I followed, settling onto the swing beside him. "You didn't have to drag me out into the rain for this, you know," I said, trying to lighten the mood. He managed a small smile, but it didn't reach his eyes. I needed to get out of the house. It felt too much. Too much what? I pressed, though my voice stayed gentle. He hesitated, kicking at the damp ground.
Too much space to think.
Too much time to feel like I'm going crazy. I waited, sensing he wasn't done. "Claire," he said finally, his voice low. "Have you felt like something's changed between us?" The question caught me off guard, even though I'd been expecting something along these lines. My grip tightened on the swing's chains as I tried to find the right words. "Changed how?" He let out a shaky breath, staring at the ground. "I don't know. It's just different. I feel like I can't talk to you the way I used to, because I'm scared you'll think I'm being weird, or that I'll ruin something." His words hung in the air, heavy with vulnerability. For a moment, I didn't know how to respond. The rain blurred the edges of the world around us, leaving only this tiny bubble of reality, where nothing felt certain. "Oliver," I said softly, "I don't think you're being weird, but I think you're scared to say something, and it's making this harder for both of us." He looked up at me then, his eyes filled with something I couldn't quite place. Fear, hope, maybe both. "I don't know how to say it," he admitted. "It's just this thing. Like we're not just us anymore." The words sent a ripple of unease through me, though I couldn't deny the truth in them. I'd felt it too, this unspoken shift, the way our closeness had taken on a different shape when I wasn't sure how to name. "I get it," I said after a long pause. "I don't know what it is either, but you're not imagining it." The relief in his expression was subtle, but it was there. He gave a small nod, as if acknowledging that we'd finally cracked open the door to something neither of us could fully understand. We stayed there a while longer, letting the drizzle wash over us as we talked about lighter things, our childhood memories, funny stories,